thank you all for being here. It's late in the day, so you're the courageous bunch. I hope I bring my A game and leave you with something here. Let me ask you guys something. I'm going to do a quick intro in just a second, but just so to get a sense for you folks. I mean, how many of you are dealing with customers on a somewhat regular basis? Okay, all right, so it's not. And the customers you deal with, is it mostly a business to business kind of thing, or business to business? Business to consumer? A little bit. Mostly business to business. Okay, all right, good. Because what we're going to talk about will relate tangentially to the business to consumer thing. It sort of extends in there, but the vast majority of the work that I've done and that we're going to be talking about will relate to the business to consumer, business to business sale. Okay. The other thing I was just telling Dan is that what we're going to be covering would often take, like a half a day to do. We're going to try to cram it into about a half an hour here, okay? However, that's not to say, it's going to be like drinking from a fire hose, because that doesn't do anybody any good. I've just tried to scale it so that we can get the key ideas in a half an hour or so. All that said, I hope that you guys will, at any time as we're going through this, just, raise your hand, jump in, ask a question. Jerry, I think that's BS. Whatever you got to, anything okay? So, it's interesting, Dan introduced a sales process. And in a sense, yes. But what we're going to be talking about today is way less about a sales process and way more about our thought process. If you saw the title, it's about sales mindset, shedding our traditional sales mindset. Okay, so quick intro, where this stuff came from. Some decades back, I pivoted my career from metallurgical engineering into sales and then into sales training. And when I was doing the sales training thing, I'm going to shut this off for a second here. When you think of sales training, you think of this kind of thing, standing up doing seminars and things like that, right? That's not what we did. The way that I worked with clients is I went out and I did joint calls with the client salespeople. I had their business cards. I didn't just sit in the corner and watch. I was active in the call. So I had the business card. We were conducting the call together. But at the same time that we were conducting that call, I was also like a fly on the wall, making the observations of the very calls that the salesperson and I were conducting. And these are, a handful, this is like 40 of them. There's some names up there you'll recognize, some that you won't, right? So I did that for about 10 years, about 1,000 calls. And what we're going to talk about today, to a very large extent, will reflect much of that work. What did I learn as I was sitting there as a fly on the wall? What are customers really responding to positively and negatively? So we're getting into that, and then as Dan mentioned, he and I worked together some years ago. Over the last many years, 6 or 7 years, I was working almost exclusively with one company in the Twin Cities, and today we'll be talking about one of their companies that I was working with quite intensively over the last several years. We're going to be talking a little bit about what happened with them as a result of shedding this thing that I call the traditional sales mindset. Okay? So we're going to talk about 4 things. Case study, we're going to give a quick backstory to the company that we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk a little bit about what's really happening in our customer interactions. And some of that will surprise you. Then we're going to did everybody get a handout? I got a handout there? Okay. There's some activities in there, nothing weird. Don't worry. It's not like, okay, Melanie was it Melanie? Yeah. Come on up and do a role play kind of thing. There won't be any of that stuff. But I think you're going to see there's some pretty cool, thought-provoking stuff in there that I hope you will find relevant to your world, and I think you will. And that's where I'm hoping we spend the bulk of the time, and then a few take-home suggestions. Okay. So, case study. Here's the backstory. The company, the larger company based in the Twin Cities that I've been working with for many years is a company called API Group. They're about a $6 billion company. They have about 60 different operating companies. And I've worked with many of the operating companies, but the one operating company that I'm going to talk about today is a company up in Duluth called Jamar. And it's a real company, you know, real people, and, you know, they're in the world of mechanical and specialty services. They do about $100 million in revenue, but here's the thing, and here's why I want to talk about them. Because I think it's just such a cool thing that they did. And everything that they did, that they accomplished, yes, I supported and everything like that, but it was done so much through the senior leadership team. That's what was really cool. So in 2020, they were ranked in the middle among like 60 sister companies in margin performance, which was pretty good given the kind of business that they were. So they were not slackers at all. Fast forward 3 or 4 years, they were awarded the CEO's EBITDA Performance Award, Margin Performance Award. And I don't want to dramatize it too much and say, this is their story, you know. So here's how it all happened. Here's how they got there. This is Jake. He's the president of the company. And as a result of a lot of influence from some of the of his colleagues at some of the sister companies, he decided, you know, we got to do something with the way that we approach customers. And so he engaged in the stuff that we're going to be talking about a little bit here, okay? But he set out 5 targeted sales objectives. 1, we got to get way better at opportunity and customer selection. Like everybody, you know, I mean, and I think all of us in this room can relate to that. Like we just, you know, so often we just chase anything that'll flog a mirror, you know, and all customers are good customers. That's not, you know, and Jake said, we can't live like that. We're not going to get where we want to get with that mindset, okay? Number 2 is we're not going to run the race to the bottom. And what's the race to the bottom? Pardon me? Yeah, it's just like, well, you know, the customer's coming back. You know, if we can just knock another $30,000 off, I think we got this one, right? That's that race to the bottom. He says, we can't do that. We're going to find a way to avoid doing that. The third one here, I thought took a great deal of courage on Jake's part. He says, we all have to differentiate, right? I mean, we all know that. But where does most of our differentiation come from? And he looked at his team, and he might have had a room this big full of people. And they're all people, you know, his team that are dealing with customers. And where is their stock in trade, their differentiation? It's from the rapport I'm able to build. It's from my responsiveness. And it's from my technical expertise. He said, if that's all we're going to rely on for our differentiation, we're not going to be different. What are we going to do? Out-rapport the competitor? Out-respond the competitor? Outsmart the competitor? We've got to count on something else. So I thought that took a lot of guts for Jake to say that. And then, of course, protecting our estimating and engineering resources. I mean, sometimes, you know, it's almost like customers think that we're in the business of developing quotes and proposals. It's like, you know, well, you make money by writing proposals, don't you? You know, it's just really, it's a funny thing. And there's often a way of thinking within the company that, well, we just got to, you know, we got to propose, we got to develop quotes and everything like that, and that's not profitable. And never let customers keep us in an information vacuum. What's he referring to with that, do you think? Never let customers keep us in an information vacuum. Everything, exactly. That's one example, right? Yes, exactly, right? That's another example. Yep. Who's our competition? All of this, information that we need in order to sort of win, right? Were you going to say something else? Okay. So these are the 5 things that they targeted. So here's what happened. For the next 6 months, Jake and the rest of the leadership team started, at the strong recommendation of a lot of the others in peers in other sister companies, started this mindset journey. Of note, though, it wasn't just a training program. It was a journey that was run by, a few of Jamar's sister companies' senior leaders. So it wasn't just a training thing. And they spent several months doing that. And it's pretty rigorous. There's a lot of practice and everything like that. Okay? So the leadership team was out first. During that journey, it was the question that I'm going to put up here in a second that really helped everything crystallize for Jake and his leadership team. And I'm going to throw it out to you guys. Let's see how we all think about it. Right, because he had these 5 outcomes that they identified. We just talked about these 5 outcomes. And the next question is well, where do those outcomes come from? Right? So one of them trumps them all. If we look at that, our sales outcomes are determined by a lot of things, but for each of us individually, one trumps them all. What is it? What do we say? What happens in my customer interactions? You sticking with that? You are. Anything else? The relationships we build, okay? Okay, so that's something else. Or that could be in the category of Eric's, right? It was Eric, sorry. Yes, I called you Rick before. One syllable, both have an R and an I. Okay. When they went through this, and they, as Jake and the leadership team was looking at this, they arrived at what I believe, and I believe very firmly, is, if you will, the right answer. And it's not what we might think. The most common response to this one is the relationships I build with customers. Okay? I don't think that's it. Eric? What is it? And good for you. Because it's rare, very rare, that we zoom in on that one. What happens is we embrace a lot of the sales dogma. What is the most dogmatic statement in all of sales is what? I bet you guys can complete this sentence for me. In the end, sales is all about, who said that? Relationships. That was quick. Were you guys all going to say that? Right? It is. It's not a helpful idea. And I know that's heresy. On a practical day in and day out level, it's unhelpful. And we're going to see why in a few minutes. Okay? It's all about what happens in our customer interactions. Okay? So let's look at that. What's happening in the buyer-seller interaction? Well, here's what I learned from 1,000 joint calls with 40 companies over 10 years. Conducting the call with the client salesperson, sitting up on the wall like a fly observing the calls. And this might be a blinding insight into the obvious for everyone here. Customers are forming a continuous, mostly subconscious, second-by-second trust response based on the signals they receive from us. So it's like the customers are sitting there in every interaction, if it's face-to-face, over the phone, a Zoom call, whatever it happens to be. They're sitting there and they got this black box trust meter. They're dialing that up and down. But they don't know that they have it, and they don't know why they're turning it up and down. But we do. Okay? That's what's going on. They're forming a trust response based on the signals that, and it looks like this, right? I mean, this is the simple graphical explanation of it, illustration of it. The right signals send the trust up. The wrong signals send the trust down. What question might we have right now? What are those signals? What are those signals? Okay. Let's look at a really quick example of it. Okay. And by the way, that graph we just showed took me years and years and years of getting the snot beat out of me by, my clients' customers as I'm trying to figure this stuff out. Okay? But it's just so simple. Here's an example. We're all familiar with this. Anybody in here, does anybody in here currently or have you in the past made cold phone calls? You calling people, on the phone. They have no idea, bam. Or if you haven't made those, have you all been on the receiving end of those calls? So we have, everybody is very familiar with the cold phone call. All right. So, I got to get the second part of that. Once upon a time, back when cold phone calls were a thing, I do not recommend cold phone calls anymore. They just don't work. Cold email, reach out is way better, but that's another conversation. So Frank Jones is sitting in his office minding his own business when his phone rings. That's what's going on here, okay? Frank is sitting in his office minding his own business. And his phone rings. What is it going to say? Hello, this is Frank, right? Hi, Mr. Jones. My name is Mark Williams from XYZ Company. Where's Frank's trust curve going? It's starting to go down. How come it's going down a little bit? Frank is sitting there, right? He's 3 or 4 seconds into this conversation, but he's clearly forming some kind of a response. And he's turning that trust meter down a little bit. How come? Because why? You addressed him as Mr. Jones. Okay, that's part of it. That's very good, because that's part of the signal that we're sending as a traditional salesperson, right? And the broader response to that, Logan? Thank you, Logan. And that was a good catch, actually. That, his name is Frank, but we call him Mr. Jones. He's dialing that thing down a little bit, because it's like, this is smelling a little bit like a what? Like a what? A sales call. Sales call. And if it's a sales call, trust is going down. And in the much longer version of this, we would spend a good hour and a half on exactly what is going on, what's happening. In fact, what Logan identified when we changed from Frank to Mr. Jones is part of what we're doing when we're triggering what I call the salesperson stereotype in the customer's mind. It has nothing to do with being a stereotypical salesperson, but it triggers a sales response in the customer's mind. Okay, so it's going down a little bit, right? Our results depend on what happens in our wait a minute, Erica, what do our results come from? From what? You said it before. You got to be my shield going forward now. What happens in our customer interactions. So we're about to see what's happening in this customer interaction. It just went down. What did Mark Williams just say to cause that curve to go down? 3 words. We all know it if we are on the receiving end of. How are you today? I said 3 words, it's 4 because I added today. How are you today? Don't get me going on this. I literally still get phone calls, and I'm doing everything I can to block them, but it's like whack-a-mole. And occasionally I'll pick them up. And that's how they still open it. It is the single worst possible way you can open a cold phone call. But I say it not necessarily to hammer this type of interaction, but I say it to illustrate this is how the curve works, how the trust response works, okay? So here's the rest of the story. So the first thing I noticed was, wait, there's a trust response that the customer is forming second by second, continuously. And I sometimes say mindlessly. I'm careful with that word because it sounds like it's pejorative, but it's not. It's sort of subconsciously. They're turning this trust curve up and down. And if we ever trigger the salesperson stereotype in the customer's mind, Frank to Mr. Smith is one way of doing it. How are you in a cold call is another way of doing it. There's a million ways to do it. That curve is going to go down. Okay? So, but here's the other thing, 2 things that I learned. This one won't be that hard for us to take in. Our mindset determines what signals we send, and we're going to be doing some practice with that. Okay? Our mindset determines what signals we send. How we're wired. Mindset, you can think about mindset as, in order for me to succeed in sales, I have to do what? How do we sort of complete that sentence? Okay? So this probably makes sense to people. But here was the other thing that was as undeniable as it was mind-blowing, is that we have all inherited a mindset that causes us to send more negative signals than positive. And that's the traditional sales mindset. And when I say we, I mean we. I mean, even while I was out there for all those years doing joint calls, I had to rearrange my mind. I had to, at the beginning of our meetings, when we'd start a meeting, what's the first thing that salespeople almost always say at the beginning of a meeting? What is your name? Bridget. Bridget's my customer. I come in, it's our first, we're having a meeting, and I'm going to say hello. I'm going to say, Bridget, hi, nice to see you. What's the next thing I often say? Thank you. Thank you for your time. I am not worthy, right? That is the master-servant dimension of the mindset. And that's just one of sort of a million examples. But the hard thing this is hard. This was hard for me to sort of make this observation, which occurred over time, and I had to make a whole lot of adjustments myself. But this company that we're talking about here, they literally, they killed it They killed it by making this decision, we're going to shed this traditional stuff, right? And it transformed their business. So let's take how many signals are there? There are 6. Over time, came to that I got to sort this out. What are the signals? And we're going to talk about 2 of them here, okay? In the longer version, if we have a whole bunch of time, we're going to talk about all 6 of them and everything like that. So, right, so here's where we are. Every time we're meeting with a customer, that customer is sitting there with a trust meter, black box, turning it up and down. The customer doesn't know he or she has that black box, nor do they know why they're turning it up and down. And I like to say, but we do. And you guys are going to tell me 2 of them right now, okay? We're only going to do 2. We can't do all 6, okay? You've all got the handout there. Let's identify 2 of those. If you could jump to page 2 in the handout. Okay? And work together on it. I mean, if there's somebody next to you and all that, just feel free to work together. You can go ahead and slide on down there if you want, you know. Right, well, first off, are we cool with this idea that, yeah, that's probably what's happening in the buyer-seller interaction? There's some kind of a dynamic trust response that's happening second by second. Does that connect and make sense to people? That actually is kind of a starting point. If it's like, oh, that's not happening, does that make sense to you, Melanie? Thank you, Melanie. Does that make sense that that's happening? That the customer is making forming a trust response, sort of dynamically second by second. Okay, thus, you know, the how are you, bam, I don't have time for this, you know what, and they hang up. That is a trust response. And so our task, right, and if we see that curve, where do we want our curve to go? We kind of want it to go up, not down. So that's what you're doing here on this page. Take a look at these 4 things. And put a plus sign in the box at the left if you believe that signal would trigger a positive trust response in the customer's mind, and a minus sign if you believe that signal would trigger a negative trust response. And note here, the 2 are the positive version of the same signal and 2 are the negative version. That's what there's 4 here. We're only identifying 2 signals, but the positive and negative version. So just look at these 4 things. You just say, okay, if the customer is receiving this signal, is it creating a negative or positive trust response? Okay, you've done it. Okay, what do we have for number 1? Salesperson communicates using words, phrases, and a style that salespeople commonly exhibit. Is that plus or minus? Let's all take that in. And in a certain sense, I'm dead serious. Do you know that every single time, thousands of times, I'll ask that question, and that salespeople commonly exhibit, is that plus or minus? Let's all take that in. And in a certain sense, I'm dead serious. Do you know that every single time, thousands of times, I'll ask that question, and every single time the response is exactly what you guys gave me, minus. In other words, if we behave in a way that people in our profession behave, we automatically trigger a negative trust response, right? That ain't a good thing. Number 2. So 2 of these are going to be negative, 2 of these are going to be positive. The salesperson's actions, demeanor, and language seem to convey honest self-interest. He or she openly expresses or subtly implies a commitment to protect his or her own time, company, resources, and profitability. Plus or minus? Plus? We're all at plus on that one? Good. Yeah, you guys are the A team. You got a plus on that one? You had minus on that one. Okay. If you had minus on that one, hold on, and thank you. There's always one. Okay. So if you had, what did you have? Let's do number 3 first. Salesperson doesn't sound like a salesperson or like a salesperson who's not trying to sound like one. Yeah. Right, and you got to add that second half of that thing because, you know, everybody knows, well, I don't want to sound like a salesperson, so what ends up happening? They end up sounding like a salesperson who's trying not to sound like a salesperson, and guess what he sounds like? A salesperson as a result of doing that. Okay, so we know that's positive or neutral. The whole thing is everything we can do to avoid triggering the salesperson stereotype in the customer's mind. None of you in this room are stereotypical salespeople. But all of us trigger the salesperson stereotype in our customers' minds, and we don't know it. Hi, nice meeting you. How are you today? I mean, thank you for your time. Right? Instead of Frank, it's Mr. Smith on a cold call. Hi, it's Mark Jones. How are you today? Bam. We're triggering that salesperson stereotype. Now, and I'm sorry I've forgotten your name. Joe. What did you have for number 4?
This was interesting. I read it, it's positive, and then read it also sounds snarky.
Okay. Yeah, and it's certainly not intended to sound snarky or anything like that, but it's clearly, there's a yin and yang here. And I hope, Joe, that when I said, oh, there's always one, right, about. This is the number 2 here is one of those things that over time I thought, can that be right? And so I set out, while I was still in the trenches doing calls, I set out to prove myself almost wrong. Every single time when you start using language that sends that signal number 2 of parity, honest self-interest, always got a better response. Simple example. Is it? Thank you. My memory was better when I was, never mind. Okay. Instead of, thank you for your time, what could we say in its place that might show some parity? Glad we can make our calendars connect. Bam. Okay? It's not that big a deal. But there's so many ways that this mindset expresses itself. And I'm here to say to you guys that this dimension of mindset is by far the hardest one to shed. By far, it's the hardest one to shed. And by far, it's the most valuable. When we succeed over time at shedding this master-servant mindset and doing it in the right way, our lives change. I swear to you guys, I could parade one person, I could parade countless people in right now who would come up here and testify to that, how much it has changed their lives. The hard part, there's 2 hard parts to it. One is getting comfortable in our own minds that it's the right thing to do, right? But the second hard part is how do we express it without sounding arrogant and unresponsive? To take a silly example of this, instead of saying, thank you for your time, or instead of saying, glad we can make our calendars connect, it's like, okay, Bridget, sit down, listen up, because I don't have a lot of time here, and I got to get to this, okay? Are we clear, all right? It's kind of not how we want to do it, all right? So the heavy lifting in shedding the master-servant mindset is, I think they're equally hard. Getting comfortable with the idea that it's the right thing to do, but then getting competent in our ability to do that by the language that we use. Does that make sense? Joe?
That's how I read it
That's how,
What you just did before, like sit down, I got something important to tell you, I don't have a lot of time. That's how I read it.
okay, good.
That's why I said it.
Good. We're actually, if time, okay, I think we're good, because you're going to see an example in a little bit on some ways of doing it that don't sound like that. You know, where that really opened my eyes. I'll never forget this. When I was, way back in the day when I was doing all those joint calls, I remember one call, and this is before I figured a lot of this stuff out, if you will. So it was my client was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I live here. And we were going to a meeting at PG&E in San Francisco, Pacific Gas and Electric. Stop and think about this for a second. He flew in, I flew in, we had rental cars, we had hotels. Back then, we had a pretty sizable bar bill. We had a lot invested in it. We go to PG&E, we go up the elevator, somebody shows us to a meeting room. The person we're going to meet with gets notified. A few minutes later, he shows up. What's the first thing the salesperson says? Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to meet with us. And that's when it was like, wait a minute, I got to say this out loud, right? Something's really wrong here. And so that was actually very early in the journey, so I started paying very close attention to that phenomenon. And it has really, it doesn't make any sense. The guy we were meeting with, he got up and walked 100 feet to the meeting. Okay, so something's very wrong with that. So I'm glad that clarified it, because if we ever come across arrogant and unresponsive, and I'm glad I'm being recorded on this, because if we ever come across arrogant and unresponsive, it's over. That's not at all what this is about. Okay, so those are 2 of the 6 signals. Our Jamar story continues. After shedding their own collective traditional sales mindset, Jake and his leadership team spent the next few years leading the effort to help all the customer-facing people in the company do the same thing. So Jake and some of the others in the senior leadership team went through, if you could call it training, but it was led by a lot of their peers, taking this stuff that we're talking about and learning it and practicing it, role-playing, coming up with customer scenarios, right? And when they, when they were far enough along, then it was time for them to roll it out to the rest of the team. This, by the way, is the reason that it was successful. Because it wasn't a training thing. It was senior leadership leading this initiative. Right? So here's Jake. We got a new guy here, Jeff Hammes. Jeff was actually with a sister company for a few years, but then was hired into Jamar. And when he was with this sister company, I was working with Jeff quite a bit and in his company. And so when he then went into Jamar, he pulled Jake aside and said, Jake, we're going to do this. This is cool stuff, right? So here's Jake and Jeff. Later in 2020, because they started their stuff. So when they now are opening their meetings with their team, they're sort of queuing it up in a way that's along these lines. And I'll just sort of read it here. Okay, everyone. We're thinking all wrong about how we engage with customers. We're animated by a traditional sales mindset. Are you guys open to completely rethinking how you approach your customer conversations? That was sort of the thing that he threw out there to them. Because that's what this is about. How you approach your customer interactions. We can see some, we're back in this. Let's take a look at the first one on page 4. Right? How mindset influences our reply to a request for budgeting out from a customer. So, I'll just let you read the scenario on your own. I won't read it to you. If I'm tired of my voice, you guys have to be. Okay? See the backstory, the scenario. Then read the emails. The initial email from Lucy. And then 2 replies. Which version do you think is old Jamar? Version 1. Obviously, version 2 is new Jamar. Okay? Why do you say that? One is what?
One is the old way of doing it, upward and way of doing that.
Yeah. It's, well, Lucy wants me to give her a number. That's what we do, right? And this one actually, when we do it in a larger session, we can actually spend a lot of time on this one and many permutations of, okay, what's the conversation like when you then call her on the phone and all that kind of stuff. But all we're looking at here is old Jamar versus new Jamar. All of us in this room, and I can say that with confidence because this is a type of scenario I've been using for a while. This is actually what they do all the time at Jamar. This is how their email replies are right now at Jamar, version 2, of course. Do the math here, right? I mean, 7 to 10 hours. Well, in the end, sales is all about relationships. I got to do this estimate in the name of the, okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 of these come in every day. What's everybody doing? They're busy. Oh, they're busy. They're working, I'm working on this bid for Lucy. I got to do this estimate for Lucy. Right? This, and I love this one in particular. Why? Because it is so simple. It is such an easy fix. Now, the conversation that you have with Lucy is another thing, but instead of that, one of my favorite parts about this reply is, when would you like something back? My time is not important. You just tell me when you want something back. We got you covered. Okay? So this change alone contributed massively to Jamar's performance. Because what was two of them actually, we got to get way better at opportunity and customer selection. And we got to do a whole lot better at protecting our estimating and engineering resources, our pre-sales resources. Right here, this simple little switch, right? Because, one of the things that, and again, we're never, just for the record here, and Joe, I'm so glad you brought that up before. Just for the record here, the outcome in one of these is never us calling Lucy, we ask her a few questions, and we say, yeah, you know what, Lucy, thanks, but nah, we ain't interested. Go find somebody else. That's never an outcome. That's never an outcome. That's never the right thing to do. Typically, what happens here, you work through something, you step back, and you get a better picture of what's really happening, and you settle on, gee, I wonder, could we just do some sort of back of the envelope kind of thing for you? Would that help you out? I could throw something together in half an hour. Yeah, that'd be great. But you see, customers do not think about that. It's not like there's any malice on Lucy's part, man, I'm gonna screw old Mark over there at Jamar and have him do my work for me. That's not how it works. Guess what? We train our customers to treat us a certain way. And you can almost see that in her email. Her implied assumption here is what? You're gonna do it. Because you've trained me to believe that every time I ask you to do something, you're gonna do it. Okay? So this one is huge. Now let's look at the second one. Totally different kind of interaction. All right. So here's the backstory, how mindset influences the way we frame up a first-time business development meeting. Sarah had initially contacted Bill by way of a successful cold reach-out email. After a few email exchanges, they agreed to meet. Read the two versions of Sarah's opening and then answer the questions that follow. I want you to do this if you're sitting next to somebody. Could you guys just read them out loud? Because I want us to taste the language. Nobody's got to come up front or anything like that, right? Just come on, one of you just read both versions out loud. And then, yeah, maybe the three of you, so just out loud, as dorky as that can sound. If you guys can do that, you guys back here. What is your name? Eileen? Sure. Okay. You want to read to me? Oh, you got a good spirit, Eileen. Okay, version 1. Good. Version 2. Thank you, Eileen. You have a good spirit. Did you guys read it out loud there? All right, good. So my question here, even before I say which one do you think is old Jamar, new Jamar, which one felt more familiar?
Familiar, comfortable, or familiar tradition?
One, right? One, all day long, right? Okay, which one do you think is old Jamar? Yeah. Now, I hesitated even bringing this particular example in because we don't have time to do a lot with it. But what we can do is at least one thing in the second question here. Again, version 1 just feels way more familiar to all of us. It's how most of us are going to start the call. And when you look at version 2, there's like one phrase in there in particular that, like, oh, homework mode. Shit, I'd never say homework mode. I'd never, the customer would throw me out. Okay? That doesn't happen. And I'm not making a pitch for using the word homework mode. But what I am doing is I'm encouraging us to start getting comfortable, letting go of this traditional stuff that we say, because we are in a world where that is getting in our way, and getting comfortable with framing things a little bit differently. That's the whole mindset thing, Joe.
Gary, I'm on a roll, but one point with version 2,
Yes.
the only thing I would take out is makes sense to you.
Okay, we're going to come. No. That's. Go ahead. Why? Yeah. Sorry.
For me, that is nothing like irks me more when somebody looks at you. Does that make sense? I think that is like one of the most patronizing things somebody can say to somebody else. Because
Okay.
it makes you feel like you're not smart enough to follow what they're saying.
Okay, and that's interesting, Joe. You're bringing up some things that make a lot of sense, and that people that have been around bring up.
Can you just say that work for you?
How does that sound? Yeah, I just.
Okay, but this is the perfect conversation. Yeah, I mean, well, first off, the only thing I will say is when we've all had the experience of talking to somebody. What is your name again? Sorry. You're Ron. So I'm talking to you, Ron, and we're just having a conversation, right? Maybe we're out at the bar and we're just shooting shit, right? You know, I'm saying blah, 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 makes sense, blah, 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 makes sense, blah, 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 makes sense. Where we use makes sense in that kind of conversation. At some point, what's Ron gonna do? He's gonna choke me. Right? That's just so annoying. So the makes sense thing can be a problem. What did you say? Work for you? Bam. Okay, so that was a very helpful conversation. You gotta have something like that in there. This is something, a tool that I call contracting language. By getting that customer's contract, permission, agreement, you've opened up a world of options. If you don't do that with, make sense, or work for you, the customer is going to start feeling interrogated as we go forward. Okay, so yes.
What I'm picking up on is it's a casual tone to get permission, which is different than even, would that be okay with you, as just that extra salesperson formality.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes. Are you Mark?
What's that?
What's your name?
Michael.
Michael.
Yes.
What's your last name, Michael?
Rampola.
Okay, you look so familiar. I thought you were somebody else, Michael.
I'm not, but that's okay.
Okay, all right. I'm looking at this guy back there and I'm seeing him nodding at stuff and it's like, okay, yeah. What Michael is just said is a nuance, but an important nuance. Because if we're like, even in the first one, would that be okay with you? Pop quiz. What signal is Sarah sending by saying, would that be okay with you? Of the two that we just talked about, was what? And it's sort of master-servant. Would that be okay with you, please? Right? That's why in the second version, we close it by saying, you know, work for you, makes sense to you? Right? It removes that master-servant feel. The other thing I want to do with this, and there's one more activity that we're going to do if there's time, and then we're done. Okay, that one's got a lot of nuances in it. Just look real quickly. Question number 2 here. To the extent that you agree with the idea that we create trust real time, as a result of the way customers process the signals they receive from us, which is creating more trust in Bill's mind? First one or the second one? What does the first one sound like? Are you agreeing, Elaine?
No, the first one sounds like very direct, you know, to the point, like, let's take care of this.
Okay, good. And what else does the first one sound like? Look at the words.
Sounds robotic.
It's robotic. What kind of words are in it? Say it, traditional sales words. Thank you for your time, master servant. I know you're busy, master servant. I'll get right to the point, master servant. Partner on some opportunities. Please don't say that. Please don't say partner, right? Opportunities. Who wants to partner on opportunities? Let's hear it. Salespeople. And if we say partner on some opportunities, we sound like a salesperson, the trust meter is going down. It just is. Appointment. Take a little of your time. Understand this is the N word. Come on, let's hear it. Somebody say it out loud. Who's always trying to understand needs? Salespeople. Just don't use that word. I'll give you an alternative in a second here. Okay? The whole premise, and we'll close it out, understand your needs so that I can tailor unique solutions to your company. Would that be okay with you? This whole version 1, which everybody uses some form of this, needs, partner, thanks for your time and all that, screams sales call. And the challenge with that, 5 minutes? Okay, good, thank you. All right. Then we won't be able to do that last one. I have an idea of what we can do with it, though, if anybody is interested. If we go back to that first activity that we did where we identified the signals, and we said, uses words, phrases, and a style that salespeople might use. How did you guys respond to that? In unison, negative. And why is that? We all instinctively understand that. If we come across in any way like a salesperson might come across, we're going to trigger a negative trust response. Every single thing in version 1 is sales language. And it's going to trigger a negative trust response. We're not going to get thrown out, okay? But we're not going to go very far. So that's what, and we can't do that last activity. I didn't think we'd have a chance to get to it, but I'll talk about it in just a second. So see, there's something about the buyer-seller interaction that's profoundly different from all other human interactions. And that's like this thing I learned. It's like, it's fundamentally different. I mean, if you're a doctor, you can talk like a doctor. An engineer, you talk like an engineer. Plumber, talk like a plumber. Accountant, talk like an accountant. Doesn't matter. But the association of a profound lack of trust with the sales profession is so strong that we have to go to, and all of us instinctively understand this, we have to go to extremes to very purposefully avoid unwittingly sending any of these signals that trigger salesperson, because it's not going to help us. Okay, Joe, I see he's got a bubble going on there. Go ahead.
Creative question.
Yeah.
I've heard that you shouldn't say love, like you love to have a conversation. Is that, am I overthinking that?
Yeah.
Use the word love?
Yeah. Thank you. The other thing that we just can't get into here is that, and I've alluded to it, is that when customers are sitting there in that conversation with us over the phone, face to face, they're dialing this meter down or up. They are operating completely mindlessly. They are not analyzing. And I'll leave you with this as one takeaway. If we operate as if our customers are analyzing the words we're using, we're going to fail. We're going to come across traditional all the time. We're never going to say things like homework mode or love, or, I mean, it's not like a word. We're going to assume that the customer is analyzing it. They don't. They process signals. That's why, when how are you on a cold call, customer's not analyzing that. He's not sitting there thinking, well, what do you think you are? I don't know this person. He's asking me how I am. This is altogether too much. I'm not going to share how I am with this person. I think I'll tell him to go and do something and hang up on him. It's not how it works. It's just instantaneous. Our task is to avoid ever triggering the salesperson stereotype in our customer's mind. And I have a thought we're going to close with some take-home things. We didn't have a formal Q&A, but hopefully you were free to ask questions along the way. A couple of take-homes. I think the first thing, you guys, is this. I like to say we all have a decision to make. We can walk out of here and say, well, okay, that was interesting, I think we have a decision to make. Do we want to, and we can become better traditional salespeople. Traditional is not fundamentally bad. Do we want to become a better traditional salesperson, or do we want to say, I want to shed my traditional mindset and really, I believe, unleash my full potential? Stop using words salespeople use. The activity that we just did, okay? Instead of needs, we're just trying to figure out, what are you trying to accomplish here? Instead of needs, okay? And then stop all expressions of the master-servant dimension of the traditional sales mindset. So we're done. Time is up. For that last activity, anybody that is inclined to read it, do it on your own. I encourage that. If you can scan it, take a picture of it, send it to me. I will respond to, if there are 200 people in here, that's a little different kind of thing. But anybody who wants to take the time, because the last one is much more robust. And Joe, I hope you will do it. Because it goes right to the very question that you brought up very early on about how we come across with that whole shedding of the master servant thing. So, okay, so a couple of takeaways. I encourage you to do that activity. Thanks, everybody. I hope this was helpful for you and you're walking away with some stuff that can change how you think about it. Okay? All right, good.